Hey,
Hey,
it's Jo Dibblee.
so good to see you.
It's good to see you, Jo. Somewhere on Vancouver Island you are.
I am. I'm in Souk, and it's just been a lovely day. Lovely day.
You don't have smoke over there?
We do have, but yesterday was really bad. Normally when I look out my office window, I can see the mountain range. I couldn't see, but today I can see the different mountain ranges. So it's much better. I mean, it's just a hazard of what's going on, and in comparison to what people are dealing with, it's a small price to pay.
Exactly.
But it has been a beautiful day.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad. Well, I'm so excited to chat with you and all that you're doing with Frock Off, and I love that name. I remember the first time I met you a couple years back, and I said that, Frock Off. I was really scared. I was going to say the other one.
And it's quite funny. It's a great icebreaker.
Oh, yeah.
And it gives people permission. It's the license to say what you're really thinking without saying it. So it's kind of nice.
It is actually kind of funny. Jo, I really want to talk to you about some really cool stuff about what you've done, what you've been doing. And I read your book. I couldn't put it down, Frock Off. But I think we can talk about the book part. But what I'd really like to help people understand is fully what it is that you do now. Because I want people to read your book. I want them to read the story about what you've done. But I'd really like to know a little bit of background on your career and where you were and where you are now and how you got to this place. And then talking about what's coming up for you. So can you share with women sort of about what your career has been and how you transitioned from, the challenges that you had into your career and where you are now?
Absolutely. And first and foremost, thank you, because, the way that we change the world, in my opinion, is this. It's real conversations. It's talking about things that, everyone has a different perspective in terms of what's really important to them, but things that really matter, just talking about things that are on our hearts and also where we go. So I appreciate you for all you do, and I know the good work that you do, and having the opportunity to be here and share with anyone who is watching this, it's a huge honor. So thank you so much. That needs to be stated first.
Thank you, Jo.
In terms of where I come from, the short version, as in the story, grew up to say it was tumultuous is kind of an understatement, as you know, but it wasn't pleasant a lot of times. It was a tough childhood. I was joking around with someone the other day, and they said, well, I don't like that. And they were talking about food. And I said, when you grow up in a house where there is no food, not a lack of what you like, but no food. When you take ketchup and make soup into it, because it's red, and if you add hot water, it has a flavor, and that is your tomato soup, you have a very different appreciation, or I have a very different appreciation for food, and I love food. Okay, and I love pie, and I love cake, and I love food. And so I'm very appreciative of that, and I think a lot of that comes from not having anything. So, fast forward, and I'll kind of take your lead in terms of how much of the story you want me to tell, but for the short version of what we're talking about right now in terms of where I came from, I was in hiding for 35 years, working with the RCMP based on murder trial. I've had 19 names, and I worked in corporate Canada during that period of time. For a large period I was whatever name I was, and I very much was a chameleon, and having to be whatever I needed to be, because along with those 19 names, I had to move all the time just to stay alive. And so, really, when I think back, it's surreal that that's my life, but I really was, a chameleon for the most part. I spent 20 plus years in corporate Canada. I was very successful under whatever name I was under at the time. And I think that's based on my resilience and my desire to find something better, to do something more with my life. The adage about those 2 days that you the most important day is the day you're born and the day you know why you were born. It took me a while. It took till 2007 for me to say, I have a much bigger purpose and I'm not hiding anymore. And I knew it was a risk to step out from where I had been and hiding. You know, the whole terminology of frock off is just merely a costume, because while I was having, you know, while I was playing those roles and having those 19 names and blah, 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 I really was just playing roles all the time, and I was disguised. And so that's where the name of the book came from, was to, you know, to frock off and live undisguised was it's a sense of freedom. So in any event, when I fast forward to 2007 and I'd had enough and decided I was going to tell my story come what may, because my children were grown. A lot of the things I had dreamed of seeing, because I went into hiding so young, I was only 19. You know, by the time I came out, I was in my 40s. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. I want more. And I think a lot of us want more. I think a lot of us, you know, whatever that thing is, whatever that's holding us back, we all have a deep desire to live the life we're intended to live, to make some kind of impact, whether it's on our family or what have you. But in any event, you know, it's led me to where I am now, which is helping women really step into their true calling.
Jo, when you talk about having 19 names, was that part of a witness protection program or a self-imposed program for your own safety?
That's a really great question, because people have an assumption when I tell or talk about being a witness for the RCMP, and for those that aren't familiar with that terminology, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, our national police force, they believe that it's witness protection like you see on TV. It's not like that. When you have been in a case where there's sexual assault and that led to murder, there were children never found. It's not the same as what you see on TV. And so I had a lot of names that I could choose from. And so we cycled through my names, because my birth name is very long. And so we cycled through variations of that. And
when
then
you say we, is that you and the police?
Yeah. So I would change my name to various, you know, my birth name is Mary Joanne Rita Ann Chalette. So I had a lot of names to choose from. You know, I was blessed in that way. I don't know what I would have done with. Actually, I find it weird when people don't have a middle name, but you know, because I needed them really clearly, and so I would go whatever new name I would go under. And there are some names that I, in particular, wasn't too fond of, but you know, they served me at the time. And there's a funny story about me wanting to change my name to this other, completely different. Right? This wasn't in my track of names. Let's put it in my drawer. But I wanted to change my name, and I didn't know how to spell the other name. So I thought, well, that isn't going to work. So, you know, they talk about us having the sweetest thing we'll ever hear is our own name. That was not the case for me. My name meant somebody actually knew who I was. And that, even close to my name, would send me flying. Like I'd want to leave immediately, because I didn't know if this person was a threat, because he had tried to find me several times.
So then, just for clarification, you worked with the RCMP, not like they do, you know, on fascinating TV shows, but you would go, they would approach you or discuss with you a name, because clearly if you're working for corporate Canada and you have all these identities, you have to have someone working together with you, because your life, your social insurance is impacted. Like, there's so many things about your life that are impacted by going in disguise in that sense. And was it their idea to put you in disguise, or was it your idea? At 19, that's a pretty big decision to make. Yeah,
so I guess sometimes I joke about this, but I don't take it lightly that I was divorced before I say this, because I don't want to offend anyone. But married names make for great aliases, because, you know, whatever my biological name was, you can act as a different person. So my social insurance number never changed, you know, but when I would show up to a new position, for example, as long as I had the trackability to take a check to the bank, for example, or if I worked for cash, there was no challenge then. But I had no friendships because it wasn't safe. So I wasn't giving out phone numbers or any of that stuff because I wasn't the same person. So imagine this. Say you and I live next door to each other for a 2-year period. It doesn't matter what it is, because there were sometimes I was someplace for 6 months and other times I was there for, 2 years. In any event, you and I get to know each other and we're best of friends. We're raising our kids together. Like, we're doing all this cool stuff. And one day you go to work and then you come home and I'm gone. There's no note. There's nothing. And that happened when the kids were really little, to one lady in particular that had helped me take care of my kids, and I had taken care of her kids. I couldn't tell her I was leaving. And honestly, the fallout of that was very painful, because just think of, we all have someone in our life that we can call, even at 3 a.m, a good friend, and that person would be there. I couldn't have that, because that meant you were at risk. And I wasn't going to, when he murdered Susan was a little girl I knew. He told me, I will murder everyone. His exact words is, I will kill everyone you love. Everything you know, everyone you love. And when he murdered Susan, that was horrific. She was 12. So that reinforced what he had told me. And you're right, 19, number one, I had no idea what I was stepping into. But at 19, I got married when I was 18. I had my daughter when I was 19. And when they came back to tell me they believed me, because they hadn't believed me when I first told them. And when they did come back to tell me they believed me, my daughter was 3.5 months old. Oh. So just imagine your child, I was like every other young mom, scared, it doesn't matter about everything else. Just, you have a baby, and it's like, what am I supposed to do with this little being? It needs to be fed, whatever. I was very overwhelmed. Anyway, they were sitting there talking to me. And there's some weird things that you remember. Like, in those moments, those crises, there was a crumb on the table, like a toast crumb. And all I could think was, I wonder if they're judging me. It was so bizarre. But, all those things are weird.
Stress and trauma that makes you do that. Yeah.
Totally. And so, in any event, they told me what had happened to Susan, and they asked me if I would stand for her, and I said yes. So it altered everything. And you're right, at 19, I was so young, but my child was crying, and all I could think about is, what if that was my daughter? What if that was my, brand new, shiny little girl whose life had been taken by someone who had done heinous things to so many of us?
So, wow, that's pretty strong. And in 19, you're focused on, like you say, as a mom, plus all the emotions, but the intellect that says this is a dangerous situation and I need to do what I need to do for the safety of my child now, myself, and the people that I love. And so when you say, so you told your story, and I can't even imagine not being believed with something so horrific. And I think as women, that is impacting certainly in our everyday lives, no matter what situation. I mean, yours was beyond the charts. Like, it was just crazy off the charts, what you were dealing with. And to have somebody not believe that. I mean, a couple of other things you can comfort yourself with, say, they'll figure it out. This was way too big. And for you to not be believed about that must have been so traumatic. Being believed. Because,
he assaulted me when I was 14 and a half. Maybe a little bit more than that. And by the time I went to the police, I was almost 16. And, obviously there's no evidence at that point. But I went. He had been stalking. He would show up at the school. It was just very, very scary. Like, he was a constant reminder that I was not safe. I wasn't safe by any stretch. And my parents weren't well. This was a foster parent. So, really, I don't blame the system. The system is extremely broken, and it's still broken.
It's very broken. It's very broken.
And not that it would be okay, but imagine, as a child, nobody, for the most part, children would not make this up, okay? Even a teenager, here's how they thought it went down. They thought it came from a disenfranchised family. I wanted attention, so therefore I lied. Now, logically speaking, it's ludicrous what happened. But what's even more sad to me, because I can take me out of the picture, I can move me over here. They don't believe 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. You know, you've been around children, you know this. Mm-hmm. So there's a challenge, because if I'm the man, and I'm not saying that only men do this, but physicality, it's just the majority of it is men that are offending. So here's the challenge. If I'm a man and you accuse me, it is such a heinous act that you can in fact destroy my life, my career, my everything. Mm-hmm. And so I understand in theory why this is a problem. Mm-hmm. However, if I am a man, I do this, you accuse me, it's legit, and you're told that what you're saying can't be true because this is a fine, upstanding citizen in society, or there's just not enough proof because it's he said, she said, right? What they're forgetting, or what's happening, I shouldn't say what they're forgetting because I can't speak for someone else and say what they're doing, but here's the outcome. I'm still the person that was victimized, or in this case you are, because I'm the person that did it. So how are you to deal with the fallout of your life? And which that's where I was. So when they didn't believe me, I didn't tell anyone else. Because if the police don't believe you and social services doesn't believe you, who is going to believe you? Because
that's the ultimate authority. And if they're not going to hear you, you're done.
Exactly. And because it was a foster family, I don't know that it made it worse. Because, you know, at this point, it didn't matter. Nobody's believing me. But what is really sad about that is I think of the kids today that are out there. And I know it's better. It's definitely not where it needs to be. But it is better than it used to be. And there is some sense of it, you know, there is some investigation that goes on that says, you know what, we have to believe that this person's telling us the truth until proven otherwise.
Right.
Where it used to be, there's no way, we cannot act on this because we don't know. Mm-hmm. And so it was horrendous that they didn't believe me. So when they came back at 19 and said, we believe you, it was, you know, why? And when they told me about Susan, I understood why. I thought he had actually gone after my sisters initially. Because my one sister was the exact same age as Susan. And he typically, when I was younger, I looked way younger, meaning I never looked my age at that point. And so his pattern, you know, they have a pattern, I can't remember what it's called right now, it's escaping me, but they have a consistent pattern, and and so was Susan. We were all his type. There were lots of me that lived and got away, but their lives didn't turn out because they had, you know, they themselves, we were foster kids. That's the best way I can say it. We didn't have, who do you turn to when no one believes you? And why bother? I think there's probably other people that spoke up even before I did, but who they spoke up to, I don't know, right? So it was horrendous.
That is, you know, just to give you a little insight, I don't share this too often, not because I'm afraid to share it, but I only share it when it comes up. When I was a young girl at 12, I went into foster care for a very short period of time. And 12 and 13, I can't remember, somewhere in that. You know, I don't know about you, but sometimes my memory from those years is so vague and mixed up. But the foster father, so it was a young family, 2 small children. They brought me under their wing for a little bit of time. And one night I was coughing. I'd gotten some kind of bronchitis. And the father came into the room in the middle of the night to check on me and tried to touch me. And I'd already been on the street for a little bit, and I fought him. I just fought him. And how his wife did not hear it, or maybe she did because they weren't that far away, but I was removed from there within 2 days. I think the wife probably got rid of me, knowing what her husband was. So I get that feeling, but I was already a tougher kid by then. And because I'd already had my time on the street, and so I had already gained some, you know, defiance and some muscle, and I wasn't under a physical life threat like that. And so, but I do relate to that feeling, and thank God, you know, that it wasn't that. And I'm so sad for yourself and those that, certainly Susan, that experienced that loss. unspeakable. But I think the big thing is that what I see in front of me when I'm looking at you, and what I've experienced from you when I've been in the same presence as you, is somewhere you believed you. And you know what's amazing, Jo, is a few years ago I was producing a TV show here in Vancouver, and we did a scene down on the downtown east side, which is where my hang-around place was. Somehow I managed to keep a needle out of my arm. Don't even ask me how. But when I was down there, you know, the crew was talking to this woman, and I spotted a woman around in her 30s. You know, she was high. I could see that she was. But I came down beside her. I blocked the cameras, and I looked at her, and I said, "Tell me your story." And she said, I said, "Because I know that you have a story. That's why you're here." And I said, I used to be here, so I want to hear. And very briefly, she said, "Well, you know, my stepdad molested me when I was 15, and my mom didn't believe me." And I looked at her, and I said, "Honey," I looked her right in the eyes. I said, "You don't belong here. You don't belong here, because you know what happened to you. And the most important person that has to believe you is you." And that is, when I see you, Jo, tell me, when did you believe you? When did you make that transition? Was it when the police believed you, or when did you really believe you?
I knew that what he had done was, like, there was never a question in my mind that it was wrong, what he had done to me.
Good.
And I knew, but I also knew that just because I knew I was right, or just because I knew what he did was beyond, it's not moral, it's much bigger than that.
It's evil.
It is. And, you know, it wasn't until I knew his story that I could put a lot into perspective. And that came later, after the book was done. But I knew that it was wrong. And you see, here's where I was blessed. And I've met so many women on my journey since I started sharing my story. Women who will come up to me and say, I have a story. It's either it's not as bad as yours, or these are the two things that they say, right? And I'm sure you've heard this before.
Yeah.
Mine's not as bad as yours, or mine's way worse than yours. And my response is always the same. First of all, it's your norm. It's all you know. It's just like all I knew. It's like you saying, you know, how did we get through those things? But so their norm is, the story is exactly the same. It isn't tit for tat or weight, because I don't think it matters, right? What I think matters is no one should ever have to go through this. Right. And no child should be left on the streets. No child should be going into what should be a safer environment. If the home isn't safe, then if they're in this situation. But where I was the luckiest is, in my case, I believe that what is much harder is it was stranger danger versus like my dad, for example, my own, even though I don't know my dad, as you know from the book, but if it had been the man who was raising me as my father doing this to me, I have so much sadness for people when it's a foster. I'm not saying it's okay by any stretch, but the person that's supposed to protect you, like really where you grow up, that to me is so, I can't even fathom how people recover from that. And yet I know what my story is and how heinous it is. But I have so much compassion for people, because how do you face those people? You know, how do you, even if you tell someone, that's supposed to be someone who loves you. That's, to me, that is probably the most painful of situations. At least if it's a bad guy, it's a bad guy. It's not someone you're related to. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I think there's a different level of vulnerability and trust that you have with your own natural parent, as opposed to someone that you expect, you know, there's a stranger, and you have a little bit of guard up anyways when you... Yeah, so I know, because with the child, there's, and it's your natural parent, there is no guard up. That's your savior, that's your safety, that's the person that's going to take care of you. And it is a different impact. And I just want to, I don't want to make this about me, but I just want to add to what you're sharing. When I was 9, so my father, without getting into it, we lived in Prince George. My father was extremely violent. He was, you know, PTSD from the war. He was just a mess. And, you know, beaten himself as a child. The oldest of 10 children, came from Russia during very difficult times. So he was extremely violent. And being beaten by him regularly myself. My siblings wasn't abnormal. But I don't know what this is. And maybe I attribute it to faith, because I had a faith experience as a 5-year-old. I don't really know. But one day my dad was so violent with my siblings. I couldn't take it. I wanted him to stop. I think I was 9. And I remember, and I don't remember all the details because, the memories are foggy because it's quite an adrenaline situation going on. But I just remember my mom wasn't home. She had just started working for the first time in her life. So she had left us alone with him. And I remember running either into the room where he was, and his favorite tool was an electric cord off a toaster or a kettle, and that's what he would use to whip us with. And he would, so I don't know if I ran into the room. I don't know where it was, but whatever it was, I needed him to stop.
Yeah.
And at 9 years old, I just went bombing in there. I've always been this kind of bravado, jump-in kind of kid. And when I did that, he stopped.
Yeah.
And in my little brain, I saw the curtain peel back, and I saw the Wizard of Oz. Honestly,
yeah.
I didn't really get it. I wouldn't have been able to articulate it, but emotionally, I went, he's broken, and I'm not scared of him in here anymore. Yeah. I was physically afraid of him because he was bigger than me, and he continued to be a bully, but I wasn't emotionally afraid. And as a result of that, I left home at 12. It's too long of a story, but when I was 17, 18, my father became sick. He had cancer for 5 years, and I was one of the few of our children. There was only 2 of us that went to his, the 5, that went to his deathbed when he was dying in Prince George. And I was able to be there and forgive him and understand. I sought to understand what could take an innocent little child and turn them into that. And as a result of that, speaking from it as my own natural dad, thank God there was no sexual abuse. I certainly have no memory of it, so I don't think there was any. I'm not going to make up stuff that wasn't true. But I think that same desire, when you said you sought to try to understand, not because you're rationalizing, you're not justifying. Evil is evil. Yeah. But if we are to maintain our value as human beings, that means everybody has value. Even the bad guys, they have value. And we have to step back and say, how does this little baby that a mama's rocking become a monster that kills? And where do we get to that place? And in some people, that there's pure sociopathic behavior, which I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, so I don't know. But I think there's power, and maybe you find that too. When I looked at my dad and I saw the Wizard of Oz, all of a sudden I was like, okay, you're wrong to do what you do, but I get why you're doing it. And now I can shift and say, you can't do that to me, and put up some boundaries without hating him.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Because I don't want that hate inside of me, right? Like I didn't want it.
And I think that is actually what destroys children, is if you don't have that, I guess, edge, and you don't find that place, that tipping point where you take back your life.
And you take your own power back, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember, for me, and I refer to this often when I told my story, there were 8 people in my life that didn't know my story, but that saw something in me that I believe I was put in their path, and they were put in my path to tell me I had some value in this world, that I needed to do something. And my pretend grandpa, for example, because I never knew there was no extended family, but I made them. I made people, like I would find a pretend grandpa, a pretend grandma. I had a pretend aunt. And I mean,
you got to do what you got to do, Jo.
I do. And you know what? I always longed for, not the Norman Rockwell thing, but that dynamic.
I have it in my heart. I totally get it.
Yeah. So I just found these peeps, and I'll never forget. You know the movie The Help?
Yes.
Okay, so The Help, there's that part where she says he was kind, he was beautiful, he was smart. And my pretend grandpa used to always say to me, you stay in school, you're going to do big things. You're going to do big things in the world. Like, you stay in school, you're smart. Where my dad, as I refer to him, would say to me, after you get out of high school, you marry someone, and they're going to take care of you for the rest of your life. my dad got my mom into prostitution. How well did that work out? Right? So when you think about it, the story didn't make sense. So I'm looking at my pretend grandpa, Mr. Boucher, and thinking, this guy knows what he's talking about, because clearly it didn't work. And I didn't even know what mom did. I didn't know what had happened. You know, we have such a parallel when you talk about your dad being in World War II. And I mean, I think that's the other thing, is that whole PTSD. And I'm not justifying anyone's.
I agree. Mm-hmm.
Right? But I'm thinking, you know, forgiveness, really, we've all heard this, and it sounds cliche, but cliches are cliches because they're truths. And it's just been repeated a million times. Really, forgiveness is the gift you give yourself. When I was able to forgive him with like every ounce of my being for what had happened, everything shifted for me. I'd already written the book. You know, I was back in Penticton where everything had gone down. I was outside the hospital, and my daughter was born in Penticton. He was born in that same hospital, in that same nursery. When you think of it, it didn't matter what the age span was. And I remember thinking, and you just touched on, when the mama rocking the baby, how did that little being, that perfect little being with all his toes and fingers, you know, all these aspirations for like huge things that would come in his life, how did he turn into someone who took lives, who scarred people for life? How did that happen? And really, as I got to know the story, I realized, of course, that's what happened. Because very few, and you're right, sociopaths, there are things where things are missing, like physically missing from the brain, that they actually they don't have any empathy. They have no remorse. I don't know that he was, although there are lots of kids that were never found, and there are a lot of women, you know, there are a lot of people that went through what I went through and lived. And you know, you talked earlier about, did that foster mom hear you? My guess is yes, because I know that in the case of Sharon, she heard people screaming, and she turned the music up because it was too much for her. And she ended up claiming battered women syndrome. Battered wife syndrome, right? Battered woman syndrome. And, you know, it's hard for me because I think back, but then it's a judgment, right? Because I think back and I go, I was 19 with a baby, willing to do whatever it took. I don't know what her story was, right? So, but in the end, if you can't get to that place of forgiveness, you actually can't live your life. Yeah. Not the way you're intended to, because there's all, right? Yeah. So,
you know, and when I think this is just a powerful conversation, because really, Jo, I mean, everything that you're doing around Frock Off is amazing, but this is the power right here. This is where it really is. And one of my passions, which is why I'm so drawn to you, one of my passions is that I want people to get their power back. And that's been something that's been in my heart, because that's what I had to do. You know, I have siblings that still find me disgusting because I forgave my dad. Yeah. And they weren't hurt quite as much as I was, actually. But maybe it's because of that. Maybe it's because it wasn't as deep of a drive, or they stopped at a certain place. But what I see, and I'm sure you see this every day, and I think this is why I love Frock Off and what you're doing so much, is that you are saying to people, you have power. And you have power to be the best version of you, and nobody can take that from you. Nobody can, because it's how you are inside when you see yourself. One of the things that I do with women, and I know you do it because I've watched you do it, you have a little bit different way of doing that than I do, because we're of our uniqueness and our unique DNA. But mine is about looking at someone and saying to them, do you really believe that that person is waking up in the morning and their whole plan is, I want to kill you or destroy you? Or is it that they are so destroyed inside they can't see anything else? And if you personalize it and you make it about you, you've got yourself in the mix, and you can step back and say, this person would do it to anybody because they're broken. And when you snap that power back and you take it back and go, this isn't personal. Like for me, as a childhood survivor of domestic violence, watching my dad beat my mother, one of the things that I was often asked to do was come and speak to women in domestic violence. And one of the things that troubled me, Jo, and I don't know how you feel about this, and I'm open to hearing your perspective, is I would say, I go to these groups and go, look, I wasn't the wife that was beaten, because believe me, no man would touch me. like that's not happening. No. But I will take you down. I might be 5'1", but I'll take you down. Which I have a couple times, but anyways, that's, that was the bar.
It's like, take your best shot. That's when I've had situations, I'm like, look, I survived a serial killer. So you best be good, because you got one shot.
Yeah.
And to that,
you better think twice.
Don't unleash, and I'm 5'1" as well, so it's stretching at a time. Yeah. But here's the thing. Don't unleash me, and don't underestimate my height.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So as a result of that, I'm saying to these women, the thing that hurts me the most when I hear you talk about your experience with your husband, and my heart goes out to you, and I feel for you, and I love you, and I'm sad for all of that. But what breaks my heart is how big you've made him.
Yeah.
You've made him so big, and it's not true. There was a man who was beating his wife. I was called in the middle of the night. I was a pastor's wife, called in the middle of the night to go deal with him. He was 6'3". I'm 5'1". I was so mad that I got woken up in the middle of the night to deal with this idiot that couldn't pull himself together. I came charging in the house, and I looked at him and I said, "Sit down. I'll deal with you in a minute." And he totally obeyed me and sat right down. And here was his wife in the room just cowering. Yeah. And I just, did what I had to do, got her the help. But the bottom point is, I wanted to say to her, he's not that big. And he looked at me and said, boy, if she was more like you, I wouldn't hit her. And I went, wow, we need to talk about the man you are, because this isn't about her. But that kind of empowerment, that kind of insight, but there's not hatred for him. It's not me going, oh, I'm going to hate him, you're going to keep him away. It's, buddy, somebody needs to look you in the eye and say, this is not your best version of who you can be. What's going on? That you're showing up hating yourself so much that you're treating other people like that. Because that's what that is. It's self-hatred. It's self-brokenness that would make someone hurt another. And so so what do you think about that, Jo?
I totally agree. And I'm known for saying, stand on your story and not in it. And realistically, what breaks my heart, it's on the same vein. I mean, it's amazing. But of course, like attracts like, okay? So, and experience attracts experience, because it's a common ground for us to talk and be able to get right into deep things, as compared to, we have to layer this and this and this so we can talk about this, when really...
I got no time to layer.
No. Layering is done. Okay. Layering is done in 1 minute, and then we're right into it, right? And so... here's where I get really, it just overwhelms me. I don't really care. I care about the person before I say this, but I really don't care about what happened, because at the end of the day, that thing happened, and then you have the rest of your life.
Yes.
Okay, so now let's imagine I was still stuck in my story from when he assaulted me. Okay, so 14 and a half-ish, 15-ish, right? Like really close to 15 at the time. And I'm now 56. All those years. So if it's a divorce, if it's a bankruptcy, it's a loss of a job, loss of, even like the most horrible losses to me would be a loss of a child, okay? But here's the end. At the end of the day, we still have to live. It's a privilege to be alive. It is an absolute privilege to live. So, because think about it, right now, at a hospital, somebody's not going home.
Yeah.
Somebody's not going home.
That's right.
And do I think it's okay what happened? No. Do I think that, I have tons of compassion for them, for anyone who's been through trauma, including the young girl I was.
Right.
But I also have enough wisdom to know that that is not who I am. That's right. Just what happened. Just like you. You could have been on the streets. When I say on the streets, I mean drug addiction. Yeah. I could have ended up in Mom's shoes. All the signs statistically point to us not going and not being who we are. That's right. Statistically. So what separates the one of us out of 5, or the 1 out of 10, or the 1 out of 4? It doesn't matter. What is that? And to me, it's hope, it's faith, it's the belief that there is something else out there, and it's someone else rising up some point in our life saying, hey, honey, you've got something. You're worthy of something. Because we don't really know. when you're little, you don't know. I used to dream about these cool things, and I'd watch planes fly. I'd never been on a plane, but I used to think, oh my, like everything was so foreign and so cool, right? And I knew in my heart something, but I didn't know what something was. And it wasn't until, I was sick and tired of being afraid. That was the turning point for me, because I'd either keep living this life that was, yes, less than, we hear about that too, but more than that, not just less than, but a life that was so filled with sadness. Like, what the hell was that?
Yeah, and so limited. And limited, so limited.
Yeah, and so I was so uncomfortable in my own skin because, number one, I was constantly lying. Like, let's call it. Doesn't matter why I had to do it. I was doing it. Okay? So either I stay in that place of trying to pretend I'm somebody else who I'm not, and trying to live up to whatever you want me to be at that moment. That's a lot of freaking pressure. Okay, frocking in this case. And it was awful. And then, to let it go. Now, my children didn't know any of this stuff. They knew nothing. So my son said to me one time, I just thought you were transient, Mom, because she kept moving us all over the place, right? Yeah. Because I needed to keep them safe. Yeah. And, I didn't want my kids to have to take care of me. And probably they did in some way anyway, because when you're always like this, there's got to be some give and take, right? I was very scared. So when I raised them, I was ridiculously strict. I don't mean like hitting those
overprotective.
Oh, I was ridiculous. If I couldn't see them, they were in trouble. Wow. I needed to be able to see them. Yeah. And someone tried to abduct Chantel when she was 10. And so, geez. And the feelings. Oh, right? Yeah. It's instant, right? And the mom of you just goes right into it. And then the person who was victimized at one point, she rises up. So I was constantly battling demons. But I often find myself questioning, like you talked about your siblings. I find myself questioning, going, okay, there were 4 kids that were raised in that house at that time. So my dad had 9 kids before he met Mom, but there's 4 of us in that house, okay? Why is it only one of us rose? Why is that? This isn't about this, by the way, not at all. It's not judgment. What I'm saying is, why is it that only one of us didn't end up in a really bad situation, but found a way? Does it mean that someone's better? I don't think that's what it means, because if you look at family dynamics, you see this all the time. Doesn't matter if they came from the country club or they came from the streets. There's always one kid. If it's a big family, there's usually one kid that rises up, and you go, look at some of the people that we admire, like the Oprahs and people like that, Richard Branson, like those people, they didn't come from a silver spoon. No. They came, and that is why they are where they are, in my opinion, is they had to overcome huge trauma. So, I mean, it's so funny, because when we talk, we could talk for 8 hours straight. And it would just be easy, because there's we're on the exact same. We may deal with it slightly different, although I don't think that much, but at the end of the day, it's that need to be the change, really. That's what it boils down to, and that's why I thought, I don't care if he finds me. And what was funny? I don't know if this happened to you, but when he assaulted me and I was so young, he never aged out, because I never saw him again. And like when he did what he did to me, then he stalked me, and then I didn't see him again. Okay.
So the picture in your mind was stuck there.
He stayed that young man that could overpower me. Yeah. And it wasn't until I was looking through the cold case files on the internet, which took me I was so scared of that man, I couldn't even look up his name. I was sure he could find me through the computer, which that's the irrational part of being in that situation.
But it's understandable.
It is. But I looked it up, and I saw this video of him going up the police stairs, like at the RCMP station in Penticton. And he was so frail, and I thought, oh my goodness. All this time, I've been so afraid he'd find me. And what was he going to do to me? I could push him over with my baby finger. I've been running marathons. Like, he couldn't walk up 3 steps. Yeah. It was funny. It was very liberating. I didn't take pleasure in seeing him sick. I took my power back in that moment as well, for knowing that he could never ever hurt me again anyway. Like even physically, he'd have to have a weapon, and even then, seriously, how would he even get just it wouldn't happen. I knew in that moment that terror was gone.
And I think that's the beauty of the maturity that happens when we take our, I'm reading an excellent book. I'm recommending it to everybody. It's called Soar Above by Dr. Stephen Stosny. It's about the toddler brain versus the adult brain and the memories that we have as a child. And I can really relate to what you're saying, Jo. In particular, I was doing some personal work. I had an abusive boss about 15 years ago. Like really, she was really abusive. And I didn't like being under that kind of power. And she was abusive to the students, and I was teaching adult education. And I was really sitting at my computer one day by myself praying, saying, come on, I'm the age that I am. I've been through all this stuff. I overcame, Daddy, and not just overcame, but learned to love and have compassion and was there for him. And, all those pieces, drove him back and forth to his cancer treatments, did whatever. And this woman is like buckling me at my knees, like not externally, but inside. I'm like, why? I don't like that weakness being there. And I did some real praying, and I sat and I just said, God, just show me. And so I was on my computer, and this word just kept coming to me all the time. Stockholm Syndrome, Stockholm Syndrome. Yeah. So I looked it up. And I'm like, okay, I get it. It's, you have to have 3 components to have Stockholm Syndrome. One is you have to be physically unequal. Right? And that means no food, you have to be under threat. You have to have some power, like a gun. You have to be held against your will, right? So you're in danger of not being fed and not having physical safety. But there's a third thing, and I never understood that third thing. And it was the third thing that, for me, I say God showed me. And all of a sudden, it just opened everything up for me. And in order for you to have Stockholm Syndrome, you have to be in physical unsafe conditions. You have to have the threat of your food and water and all those stuff taken from you. And then the third thing, you know what it is, Jo?
No.
You have to believe they have that power.
Wow.
That's the third piece for Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah. That makes sense, because when you've been in a situation where everything is threatened and that person seems to wield all that power, that totally makes sense to me.
And isn't that amazing? Because that's the root of what I get down to people. My husband, I'm not going to get into it because it's worth another story, and I blogged about it. He had a terrible tragedy happen to him. They lost their first daughter. This is such a sad story, and it's not mine to tell. But when I met him, he was still in full grief after 25 years. Like, I'm talking full grief. And I was like, oh my God, this guy needs to be healed. And I know, like you do, that at the core of our pain is a belief that's gone wrong. Because truth always sets free. Like, it's true. When you see him walking up those steps, you see the truth. He's older, he's frail, he's broken, and that frees you. And
it's like, that's it. He has no more power. And I was not that little girl anymore.
Yeah. And he did at the time because you were in those circumstances. And I think that's the thing that I am passionate about. And I do love the way you've done Frock Off, because you're telling people, be courageous, throw off those things that aren't real. It's not worth it. It's not worth losing your identity and your life over. And that courage, that bravery. But I really believe my work is a little bit different than yours. I look right at women, often one-to-one, or people, and say, let's examine your beliefs. Yes. And let's look at them. And I'm not going to take them away from you, because it's really important for you to believe that, because that's how you've survived. Because, oh my God, what happens if what you believed isn't true? Then you've just wasted 15 years of hating somebody. So I don't want to hurt you. So I will say, okay, you hold on to your belief, and I'll just give you this other idea, but just keep holding on. And then but I get to that place where I'm like, do you really believe what you are believing? Because the power to believe, it's what's keeping you wherever you are. And it's very important for us to examine what we believe and be willing to expose that belief. If it's not wrong, we're not worried about it being under examination.
No.
But if it's wrong, it's worth looking at. And when we can't resolve a problem and it cycles and cycles and cycles, we need to get to the root of, wait a minute, if truth sets free, because that's my true north and that's my foundation, you know, it's the sun rises in the west and sets in the east. If truth sets free, and I'm not free, or I can't forgive this person, or I'm holding bitterness or anger, somewhere I'm believing a lie, and I need to be willing to look at it. Yes. Do you feel that sums up for you what your work is? A little bit different than mine, but I think it crosses over.
It does, and I mean, certainly I experienced that, because the minute I saw him, you know, I was... so many emotions came through, because remember, I'm sitting at a computer. He's in another, like the video's old, and I can see that he's frail. But all that power was immediately gone. You know, even though I had been getting on and doing my, like, living life. I don't know if it was my true life, because it wasn't. But I mean, I was living a lot of different parts, but not comprehensive, not completely, not wholly, but I had a lot of good stuff going. But seeing that changed everything, and I absolutely believe that. You're right, we come at it differently, because I work with primarily women entrepreneurs, right, and helping them to understand, because my drive is, if I can help you, if I boil it right down to brass tacks, if I can help you earn more money, you will give back more. That's all that I do. That's all I'm motivated by, because I think if I know that's, you know, it's easy for us, I shouldn't say easy, but when you have a skill set, you can look at someone and go, hey, what if you tried this? Like you said, hold on to your belief. It's, you know, in my mind, I'm going, yeah, it's crap, but hold on to it, okay? Because seriously, if it's kept you in this place for 30 years, there might be something wrong with it. Just in, because you weren't born to have this, right? But that being said, I don't go there. Where I go is, I'm like, okay, what is stopping you? What is that? What is that one thing that will help you leverage what you know and do? And you should be able to see success in your life, in your love, meaning your relationships, and in your business, if you're a businesswoman. My goal then is, if you are starting to see this success, that you will say, who can I give a hand up to, not out? Who can I donate to? Who can I be of service to? Whether it's through sharing of this knowledge or whether it's cash, you know, we donate everything that we do, right? I mean, I live a very comfortable life. We don't live an extravagant life, but I'm so happy. And I mean, I can't even tell, the room I'm in, my office, is bigger than, like, when we lived in one of the small towns, this is way bigger than the living room was. Like, it's like a grand hall, okay? It's not a massive house. That's not the point. It's all perspective. But I never forget that it's a privilege that I lived. I just don't forget that. And I also don't forget that there are people out there right now that are broken, and they're hurting, and they're sad, and they're not living the light. And I'm not judging. What I'm saying is they're not fully living that life that when they came home shiny and new.
What they get to have, what they have an absolute right to have. Exactly. You have a right to live a joyful, full, and complete life. Yep, there's challenges, but you get to be all that you can be.
100%. Yeah. 100%. And so to see someone, you know, I remember this woman that I was working with under a different name, go figure, and she ran a $10 million business. Wow. Okay, a $10 million a year, that was her revenues. Which, whatever, go girl, you rock. And she said to me, not once, but several times, about that she felt like an imposter, a fraud, and a failure. And I'm like, holy cow, how can you feel that? Yeah. And I looked at her and I thought, oh my gosh, but isn't it often the case that people will look at other people and judge for what they see or they admire in that other person because they long to be that themselves, whatever that is. I long to be free. I long to be independent. I've always had to financially, it's not like anyone's ever covered me, let's put it that way. But on the same token, I had that for a very long time. I lived sort of hand to mouth, trying to figure out how I was going to make everything happen, take care of my kidlets, It was and that's just life, okay? I'm not, this isn't a wow story, it's just what it was. But here's this woman I'm looking at thinking, you feel like a fraud? I'm a liar, right? For me, it was like, how can you feel like a fraud? And the more I talked to people, the more I realized that this was a common problem.
Yes.
Whether they were coming from, domestic abuse situations, or there had been assault, or there had been, maybe their parents had such high expectations for them, they didn't go into whatever, it didn't matter. But the reality was, we're not alone. And that helped me heal, because I was looking at these people thinking, I think you are like amazing, and you don't see it. And I could see in them, just as you can see in others, these beautiful gifts, but they couldn't see them in themselves. And so I found that I primarily have worked with women throughout my whole career, even in corporate Canada, even when I was working where it wasn't really designated. But I remember one of my bosses saying to me, Jo, you hit the minority quota for us. You only hired women. It wasn't even on purpose. It was just they were the most qualified. Yeah. It wasn't a judgment. But in any event, I saw this over and over again. I saw people that were very successful. The other thing that I saw is that they were striving for success, but they weren't happy anyway. And they couldn't figure out how to bridge the gap. And, the more I would talk to them about giving back, volunteering, those kinds of things. And all of a sudden the heart starts to heal, because you start to appreciate things in a different way, right? And you see your path could have easily been their path, right? And so, or their path could have easily been yours, I should say. And so that changed everything. And that's what's led me to where I am. But yet we think so, you and I think so similar. It's just how we tackle it, or how we come at it is slightly different. But in the end, my thing is, man, if more people can do well in the world, then they can do more in the world, and then we can help more people. And then, and ideally I want to fix the system, but that's a big journey, and one we will have to talk about more because it's another story. But I really believe that each of us has, like you said, we have a right, we have a destiny to fulfill, whatever that is. And I don't know what someone else's is, but sure took me a long time to get where I am. And it took me a long time to own mine. And I can say that. So I always say to people, it's never, ever too late. Right. No matter what's happened to you, you just don't know. But you'll know in your heart when you're doing it, for sure. But, really, my mom died with all those dreams, all those goals, all those desires. She was so ashamed of what had happened. Said, Mom, who the hell cares what you did when you were a kid? So she lived the rest of her whole life. She lived a life sentence of punishment.
A self-imposed life sentence, which is really sad. Yeah.
And she frocked up. She frocked up all the time. And I'll tell you, when I first launched, I'd love to tell you that it was not scary. That's a lie. It was so freaking scary. Yeah. I mean, what were people going to think? Here I was, the daughter, it doesn't, when it boils down to it, Mom sometimes would make it look prettier by calling it a call girl. And this is not a judgment on my mom.
No, of course not. These are just facts. They're just facts.
And I thought, what are people going to think of me? And who am I to tell them how to live their life? Well, you know what? Just like you, I came from the hard knocks school. Different street, doesn't matter. Yeah. The bottom line is, those of us that have been, I think, have a lot of empathy, and also the way to get people to move them from where they're at to
I feel for you, but here's the way out. Yeah, exactly.
You have to stay there, right? And so, it's such a, I mean, it really is amazing to watch these women transform, because they're already doing big things. Now they get to do bigger things, and now they're helping. Like someone today, we have an event in Alberta, and somebody bought 4 tickets for other women.
Wow, that's amazing.
Because they want them to have, and so it's just amazing to watch these women rise up. And I know you know what I'm talking. I get goosebumps about that, because, wow, if I was to leave the planet tomorrow, at least I know I did something to move somebody forward.
And you sure have, Jo. You really, really have. That's the beauty, when we all find our courage in our story and we're willing to tell it, and really become at peace with ourselves inside. A man who's divided against himself is his own worst enemy. And your work, my work, dovetail together in that we say to women, look, when you're acting this way, you're behaving this way, you're working against your own good, it's because somewhere inside you do not have that peace with yourself. And to fix that fractured relationship inside of you by really looking at it. And, you know, it's something that I do every single day with women, you know, help that I do it differently than you, but I sit and say, oh, so tell me, oh, so you're hurting. Wow, that's, you know, I empathy, climb into the pain with them and just like, let me know when you don't want to hurt anymore. I'll be right here with you and I'll help you out. And you give them that compassion, and then they say, oh, okay, there's a way out. Yeah. But I'm not telling you you have to, but you can stay there if you like, because I know the mud's comfortable. But I'm right here when you want to, and I will help you find your own voice. I've had women just even recently, and I'm not saying this to brag, but it's the work that we do, right? It's the gift that we have given to ourselves that we share with others. And a woman said to me, oh my gosh, she said, like she's in her 50s, she said, I have never been able to manage myself as well as I'm doing now, and I love it.
That's awesome.
It is so beautiful, and I hear that all the time. Oh, Jo, we could go on forever, and I'm gonna, when I do this blog and I send this out, I'm gonna say to women, sit down with your glass of wine, grab a group of women together, and listen to this interview together, because it's worth it. You've got so many things going on, so I just want to just chat really fast. And I'm going to put these on the link onto the blog itself, so that all the links are there for everybody who's listening. So the Frock Off has won a medal number 4 in true crime. Oh my goodness, that's amazing!
You know what? I wanted to go back for a second. It's not bragging. It's not anything. It's acknowledging our gifts.
It's accomplishment.
And I'll tell you this. I laugh. I'm going to get emotional, so don't go there. To have your work validated in such a way that a complete stranger sends you an email and says, you saved my life, when really they saved their life. So we become a catalyst. That's what we are. Yeah. That's all that. I shouldn't speak for you, but I'll say for myself.
I agree with you. A catalyst for positive change. I do.
Exactly. And so this is the 4th time that we have been awarded, and it is, like I said when I sent it out, I'm gobsmacked. Like, I'm dyslexic.
Yeah.
Okay? So,
me too, by the way.
Well, of course you are, because we're related.
Yeah.
Seriously. Well, who knows, right? Like, no, I'm kidding. I'm just saying. Okay. But here's the thing. Like, I worked with an editor who's phenomenal, and I attribute all of that to her. But I'll tell you what, you know, taking that chance and writing it down, even if it hadn't been published, it was a big healing piece for me. But to have people sit down and like, it's amazing. There are 33,000 books that go through that contest.
Wow.
And, you know, at minimum, there are 750 winners in different categories this year. But to be able to, you know, just to have that recognized, even if it went nowhere else, it's so amazing to me, because it just is proof.
It's a confirmation. Positive. It's a confirmation
that I'm on the right page, right?
You're doing what you should be doing. And that is so beautiful. That is, like, for me, when someone else acknowledges my work, it's gravy. I don't need it. It's gravy. No. And it's a confirmation, like what you're saying, that I'm on the right track. It's a reminder that yes, keep going.
And it's social proof to say to both, like, to ourselves and to someone else who's struggling, that it can be done.
Yeah. If
you can rise up, like, if I look back and ketchup soup, seriously, ketchup soup can rise up.
Yeah.
This isn't about me.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's possible. Every one of us has something in us that's so unique and so needed in the world. And I mean, right now, my goodness, we need some serious intervention.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of sadness, but there is also a lot of hope, because I don't stay in the negative place. I can't, otherwise I wouldn't be where I am.
Well, life wouldn't balance itself out, because dark cannot exist. And when light shows up, dark does become balanced, right? We do have challenges, and, you know, we've identified those. So you've got 2 upcoming events, one in Sylvan Lake in Alberta, September 15th to the 16th. How beautiful is that?
Yeah.
And then you have another one in Phoenix, Arizona, October 13th to the 14th, and I'll put all those links there for my American and North American friends. You're finishing your 4th book.
Yes. May I show you something?
Yes.
Very excited. You know, you just never know when a gift is going to show up in your life. Right. Do you know Diana Bose? Have you ever met Diana Bose with Fabulous at 50? She has an amazing group of women, and it's about your second act. She's very talented in many different things, but she presented this to me the other day. I don't know if you can see it very well.
It's beautiful.
Stunning. And the book that I'm writing, and she didn't know this. I'm writing a book called Bella's Dash. It's about our puppy, and I think you know a little bit about that.
I do.
And this is going to be the cover, and she had no idea. She just presented this to me, and I couldn't even talk. I was like,
"Oh, Jo, that's beautiful!"
I'm so excited, and I shout out to her for. But you see, when we're in the right place,
things come.
Things come. Like, if I had asked for something like this, it wouldn't have been the same.
No, because you would have had to describe it. You would have tried to. But when you see it, your heart witnesses. That's it.
I couldn't even talk. I was like completely. You know, that's quite a statement. I'm not at a loss for words.
I know people say that about me too.
But I was blown away. So yeah, I'm sorry. I had to share that. That's going to come out
I love it.
Year at some point. Like, I'm hoping to have it out in December, but you know, I never have a need to rush it. Yeah. I want it to be.
You'll know. You're a smart woman. You know, and you know how to listen to the timing in your own heart. What feels peaceful. Yeah. And it always works out to be, right? You're donating your proceeds to the Little Warriors, and Because I'm a Girl, which is, you're continuing to do that, which is amazing. And you've donated over $30,000 in cash and books to those causes, and women's shelters, which I totally love. And and I'm going to be directing everybody to your website and your book covers, and keeping up with you in what you're doing. I just can't even. I mean, we could go on all night, and we probably should when I come to the island next time, because I love Souk.
Yeah.
And you know those new places right out on the water where those beautiful condos out there?
Yes.
Yeah, we were out there this summer and saw them, and we're drooling over them, and so that would be my dream, is to live in one of those and just watch the whales.
I do love it here. It's absolutely, you know, my heart. I've come home because I'm a BC girl, so I've come home, and it's been just remarkable for me to be here, you know. Yeah. But yeah, we could definitely go on forever. I just gave you the events that were for this year, because I thought it was just a long, because we're always doing things. We do stuff in Vancouver and as well on the island. But the reality is, you know, this is such an honor, and to have this is a real conversation. I made a commitment to myself after when I had cancer when I was younger, and I said I had to have one authentic conversation a day, and that's how it started. Just now, all day is all authentic.
That's beautiful.
I got to tell you, now that I'm in this space and having this conversation with you, and it's like looking and talking to a mirror about what needs to happen, right? Which is such an honor. So I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
It's
I really appreciate you.
Yeah, and I so appreciate you, Jo, and your work. I loved you the second I saw you. I loved you. I thought it was unusual. I don't know that I want to frock. What am I going to frock off? I walk around my life like an open book. I got worried. Do I have anything? I think I've given it all up. But I was just teasing. But I love your work, and I know we're going to just stay connected. I want to promote what you're doing. I want women to be encouraged. I want them to really sit down with a glass of wine, and I'm going to spread it around, because I want people to connect like we have, because I know they do. I know they want to. And when we sort of step out and we show them how, they pick up on it, and it feels safe, and they're like, oh, we can do this, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyways, love you to pieces, and all the best to you, and we will chat soon.
Thank you, hon.
Okay.
Have a great one. Take care.
Okay, hon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.